Beads of sweat trickled down his spine, seeping into the waistband of his cheap, washed-out overalls. The oppressive late summer heat of Brooklyn, fermented by the subway and then amplified by the central air conditioning, clung to Alex Carter's skin, leaving it sticky and irritating. He gripped the grimy sponge and scrubbed the polished marble floor beneath his feet. Each push and drag was a fierce effort to scrape away the false luster. The air was thick with the pungent smell of lemon disinfectant, mingling with the faint greasiness of leftover pizza wafting from the corner. This was the heart of Wall Street, the trading floor of Canaan capital. At 3 in the morning, the lights were still mostly on, illuminating the dazzling torrent of numbers pulsing across the giant screens red and green, like a never-ending pulse of greed. Alex's eyes scanned the screens as if examining the language of another planet. How many Brooklyn blocks could those numbers buy? How many more people, like his mother, struggling in cheap nursing homes could be saved? He shook his head, dismissing these useless thoughts and returning his attention to the stubborn stain beneath his feet. It was the mark left by a trader's hastily knocked over espresso, a dark brown stain stubbornly embedded in the stone, like some ominous brand. Just as he was about to merge with the stain, a deliberately subdued, yet undeniably excited, voice rose from the lounge area. Alex paused. The voice came from behind the row of giant plants. It was Charles Wentworth. The Prince of Canaan capital, the future helmsman, the heir to a wealthy family whose very name could make Lower Manhattan tremble. In Argentina, the sources are absolutely reliable, Charles said, his voice filled with the certainty of someone in control. The government is rotten to the core, and the debt restructuring is a joke. They won't be able to hold on by the end of the month and will definitely default. Another voice echoed, in the calculating tone characteristic of Wall Street elites, Charles, this is a godsend. Short their sovereign bonds, plus a few core bank stocks. Leverage to the max. This wave of gains will be enough to make the Wentworth family's financial report this year a blast. Alex's heart skipped a beat. An Argentine debt default, he remembered glancing at the old newspaper in the corner of the cleaning room that day. It seemed like some groundless rumor. He subconsciously held his breath, his body suspended in mid-air, leaning forward slightly, his ears catching every word. Short-selling plans, leverage ratios, target company names. Fragments of information quickly pieced together in his mind. Next quarter, the old man should shut up completely, Charles said, his voice dripping with the smug satisfaction of impending triumph. Show those old fogies what the true art of finance is. The conversation faded, and footsteps approached Alex. He suddenly lowered his head, almost burying his face in the bucket, mechanically and vigorously scraping the floor with the sponge in his hand, as if trying to polish through the marble. But it was too late. The shiny Italian handmade leather shoes stopped beside the bucket in front of him. Alex's eyes could only see the straight, wrinkle-free legs of his suit trousers. "Hey, you," Charles's voice came from above, a matter-of-fact condescension. Alex slowly raised his head. Charles Wentworth was looking down at him, his handsome face expressionless, his eyes as if he were assessing a piece of obstructive old furniture. Behind him stood the partner who had spoken earlier, a faint, almost playful smile on his lips. Sir Alex's voice was dry, his throat tight. The smell of the lemon disinfectant seemed even stronger, making his nose sting. Charles said nothing, merely shifting his toes slightly. With a casual, insulting force, his expensive leather shoe clanged, knocking over the plastic bucket of dirty water at Alex's feet. Instantly, the dark grey water surged out, spreading rapidly across the floor like a filthy snake, covering the area Alex had just cleaned and even soaking the worn uppers of his shoes. A cold, sticky feeling seeped through the cheap canvas. "Idiot!" Charles's voice was cold, with a hint of undisguised contempt. "Are your eyes on top of your head? You're blocking my way." He pulled out a snow-white handkerchief and slowly wiped the toe of his shoe, which hadn't touched the dirty water at all, as if it had just come into contact with something disgusting. "Listen, do your job, mop your floors. These numbers." He raised his chin, gesturing at the trading screens gleaming with the glitter of vast wealth. "They're not for lowlifes like you. Do you understand? You're only fit to understand this." He casually tossed the priceless handkerchief into the overflowing slop like a scrap of waste paper. Then, without another glance at Alex, he chatted and laughed with his partner, his leather shoes clacking through the messy water stain as he headed for the private elevator in the distance. The water stain clung coldly to his feet. Alex froze in place, staring at the white handkerchief soaked in slop. Every word Charles spoke was like a poisoned needle, piercing the deepest corners of his mind. "Lowlifes, only fit to mop floors, what do you know about finance?" A surge of heat surged up from his stomach, burning his throat. It wasn't anger, that was too shallow. It was a completely ignited flame, a mixture of humiliation and a sense of immense absurdity. The numbers on the screen, the conspiracy about Argentina's debt default. They were no longer distant, no longer irrelevant to him. They became the glove Charles Wentworth flung across his face, a naked declaration of war. "That's all you deserve to know." Alex silently pondered the words, staring at the elevator entrance where Charles had disappeared. He slowly bent down, picked up the stained, expensive handkerchief, and clenched it tightly. The damp, cold fabric rubbed against his palm. An unprecedented, almost insane urge seized him. Why could they decide the fate of countless people with a flick of their fingers, while he was left here, getting kicked over the bucket, being called lowlife? Charles's determined short-selling plan. The coordinates of his prey, practically revealed by him. A thought, like lightning, split the chaotic fog in his mind. The opposite strategy. Charles was going to short Argentine bonds and bank stocks, so he would go all in and buy them. The very thought carried a devastating madness. What did he have? It was just his meager hourly salary as a cleaner, plus the savings he'd scraped together while his mother struggled in a low-rent nursing home to pay for the next semester of community college. The crumpled bills, soaked with sweat and hope, tucked away in a metal box under his mattress. And then there were all the small loans he'd taken out over the past 3 years to keep afloat and pay for his mother's meager medical bills. Each one felt like a noose around his neck. All in. The word tasted like rust on Alex's tongue. Either he'd be crushed to pieces, plunging deeper into debt, or a slim chance to crush Charles Wentworth's arrogant face beneath his feet. He stood up straight and looked around. The trading floor remained empty even in the early morning. He hurried to the corner cleaning tool room and locked the door behind him. The small space was cluttered with clutter, and the smell of disinfectant and dust was even stronger. He pulled out his old Android phone, its screen shattered like a spider web. His fingers trembled slightly from the strain. The cold plastic rubbed against his palm. He took a deep breath, the pungent smell of disinfectant strangely clearing his mind. He tapped the green chat app icon, which he had only used to add contacts for microloans. There were only a few people in the list. His fingertips hovered over the screen, trembling slightly. He first found college savings. It was a note. He clicked on the transfer page and entered the amount. He remembered it down to the cent. It was the hope he had accumulated through scrimping and saving, through countless late-night overtime. A hope that could change his fate. His fingertips hovered over the confirm button, and he closed his eyes. His mother's tired, expectant eyes flashed in the darkness. When he opened them again, only a desperate determination remained. He pressed hard. Next, backup for mother's medical expenses. The amount was much smaller, but it felt like a heartbreak. He gritted his teeth and confirmed again. Finally, it was the microloan apps. He opened them one by one. The cold reminders of repayment and the rolling high interest rates assaulted his retinas. He ignored all the warnings and withdrew all the available loans, even if they were only a few $100s into a single account. Each confirmation felt like signing a deed of indenture to hell. The light from his phone screen illuminated his pale face, and a fine layer of cold sweat trickled down his forehead. The only sounds in the tool room were his heavy breathing and the faint click of his phone's buttons. After all this, he opened the online stock trading app with a simple interface but the lowest fees one he had downloaded years ago out of curiosity and never actually used. The account balance showed a pitiful figure, 500.37. He entered the Argentinian sovereign bond codes and bank stock names Charles had mentioned. His fingers paused over the buy and leverage options. Leverage. The noose of finance. It's also the only possible springboard for a pauper. He steeled himself and pushed the slider representing risk to the maximum allowed on this rudimentary platform. A cold, shocking number popped up, indicating the critical point of liquidation, a price fluctuation so small it was almost certain to hit, and he could be wiped out in an instant, burdened with debts he could never repay in 10 lifetimes. The confirm buy button on the screen was a blinding red, like congealed blood or the entrance to hell. Sweat trickled down his temples, dripping onto the cold screen of his phone, creating a small blur. The tool room was dead silent, with only the heavy, drum-like thump of his heartbeat rumbling in the cramped space. Each beat pounded against his eardrums, numbing his fingertips. His mother's silhouette sorting pills in the dim light, Charles's scornful look as he kicked over the bucket, the Scarlet Collection notices on the microloan app, countless fragments of images spun and collided wildly in his mind. Time seemed to freeze. Seconds, minutes, it felt like an eternity. Finally, he closed his eyes and, with all his strength, pressed his trembling thumb down hard. A soft click. The transaction was complete. His account balance instantly sank to a vast, ethereal negative number, marked with the terrifying leverage ratio and the risk of a margin call. The world was silent. Even his own heartbeat faded. Alex leaned against the cold tool room door and slid down. His phone sank limply to the stained floor, the screen still lit, displaying that one-way ticket to heaven or hell. He clutched his head, his knuckles white from the strain. A crushing fear, like an icy tide, instantly washed over him, nearly suffocating him. What had he just done? Had he really staked everything, himself and his mother, on the drunken whispers of that arrogant bastard? Icy despair gripped him.